Chapter 1. The Loop. The old woman died at moonrise. Willa had done everything right. She'd assessed the pulse, measured the breathing, crushed the herbs and steeped the teas with the focused precision that had carried her reputation across 3 territories. She'd adjusted the dosage twice, monitored the temperature of the room, kept her hands steady and her mind clear. None of it mattered. When the moon crested the top of the sun spire, the moonkeeper, Asha, ancient and impossibly frail, exhaled one last time and didn't inhale again. Failure. It tasted like ash in Willa's mouth, an old familiar taste she had never learned to tolerate. Her wolf sat with the silence for a moment. Then, well, that's not ideal, but we did our best. Her best was very good. The universe is rude. Let's sleep and be angry about it tomorrow. Willa retreated to the small guest chamber she'd been given in the Palace of the Silent Ash. She fell into a restless sleep, her wolf curled tight somewhere behind her sternum, unusually quiet. She woke to the sharp, insistent cry of a morning bird outside her window. Sunlight streamed through the glass, landing in the exact same pattern on the worn rug. She sat up, her body aching with a wrongness she couldn't name, like walking into a room and knowing the furniture had been moved, but not being able to say which piece. Her wolf felt it too, and the sarcasm was gone. Something is off. The light is the same. The bird is the same. The exact same bird. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. When I said be angry about it tomorrow, I did not mean the same tomorrow. Willa dressed and made her way to the kitchens, intending to face the grieving pack over a cup of tea. A guard in the hallway nodded to her. "Morning, healer. The king is expecting you. The moonkeeper had a rough night." Willa froze, her hand on the kitchen door.
"The moonkeeper. What?"
"Elder Asha," the guard clarified, looking confused. "King Bastian said you were to go straight to her chambers upon waking." A cold dread, slick and oily, slid down Willa's spine. "Run," her wolf said. "Not away. Up. Now." She didn't run, but every step up the winding stairs of the Sunspire was a frantic prayer. She pushed open the door. King Bastian stood by the window, his back to her, his posture ramrod straight. And in the bed, looking exactly as she had 24 hours ago, was Asha. Alive, breath thin as spun glass. "Healer Willa," Bastian said, turning. The look on his face was one of grim expectation. "Thank you for coming so promptly. I fear we don't have much time." It was Tuesday. Again. It had not, in fact, started simply. It had started 3 months ago, the first time Willa came to the palace. Asha's decline had been slow and stubborn, the kind that didn't respond to a single visit, and so Willa kept coming back. Every 2 or 3 weeks, another satchel, another attempt, another few days in the guest chamber at the end of the hall. She was, she told herself, simply being thorough. The moonkeeper was an important patient. The Silverwood pack was paying well. There was no other reason to keep returning to a palace that smelled like cold pine and old stone, and a king who made her wolf do things she refused to acknowledge. She had met Bastian on that first visit. He had been waiting in the great hall with his ramrod posture and his gravitational pull control and his wolf-still silence, and something in her chest had shifted like a fault line. She'd ignored it. She was good at ignoring things. She'd been ignoring things professionally for 6 years. Her wolf had not ignored it. Him, the enforcer had said, on that very first day. And then, when Willa shut it down, "Fine, but I'm keeping a file. It's going to be a big file." Over the months, the file had grown. Each visit, the way his voice changed when he spoke to her, lower and less controlled than the voice he used with everyone else. The way he always happened to be in the hallway when she arrived, as if he'd been waiting but would die before admitting it. The way his wolf surfaced in small, unguarded moments, a too-fast head turn when she entered a room, a rumble in his chest he'd cover with a cough, the particular quality of his stillness when she was near, the kind that radiated attention disguised as composure. Willa noticed all of it. She filed it under professional observation. Her wolf filed it under denial, active. Bastion's wolf had been equally unhelpful. The healer is returning on Thursday, his wolf had noted before her third visit, with the terrifying mildness of someone stating a fact while suppressing an earthquake. This is not significant. We do not anticipate her arrival. We have simply been aware of the calendar. For unrelated reasons. He had then spent the entire morning reorganizing his study, which he had not done in 3 years. She smells like crushed sage and rain on warm stone, his wolf had observed during that third visit, watching Willa work over Asha's bed. We have noted this. We noted it last time. We are noting it again. This is becoming a pattern I do not wish to examine. He paused. Her hands are very steady. That is also noted. For no reason. Neither of them had said anything. Neither of them had acknowledged the charge in the air when they were in the same room, or the way conversations between them lasted slightly longer than they needed to, or the way Willa had started bringing the palace's terrible coffee to Asha's room at times that happened to coincide with when Bastion visited. They were both experts at not seeing what was directly in front of them. They had elevated it to an art form. Asha had seen everything. She had been the Moonkeeper since before Bastion was born. She had taught him to read the old script when he was 7. She was there when his father died, and she had watched the boy seal himself inside the king like a man bricking himself into a room. She had the old sight, the ability to read the threads that connected people, the bonds that fate laid down whether its subjects cooperated or not. And for 3 months, from her bed in the Sunspire, she had watched the thread between Bastion and the visiting healer glow brighter with every visit, while both of them pretended it wasn't there. She was dying. She knew this with the practical clarity of someone who had seen many deaths and could recognize her own approaching. And she knew, with equal clarity, that these two stubborn, frightened, magnificent idiots would never find their way to each other without help. She had watched Bastion keep his entire pack at arm's length for 12 years. She had watched Willa arrive and leave, never staying longer than she had to, bolting before anything could take root. They would do this forever. They would circle each other until one of them left for good, and the bond would calcify into the particular sadness of a thing that almost happened. So on the last Tuesday, the one Willa was already thinking of as the real one, when Willa arrived with her satchel and Bastion was waiting in the great hall, with his impossible posture and his wolf barely leashed behind his eyes, Asha made a decision. "Healer Willa," Bastion said, his voice carrying the careful neutrality he'd perfected over their visits, warm enough to be polite, controlled enough to betray nothing. "Thank you for coming. She's had a difficult week." His wolf, "She is here. She smells like sage and rain. Our entire nervous system has reorganized. This happens every time. We should probably address this." "We will not address this." "Of course," Willa said, with the matching careful neutrality she'd perfected in return. She didn't look at him longer than necessary. She'd learned not to. Looking too long made her wolf loud, and a loud wolf made her hands unsteady, and unsteady hands were unacceptable when there was a patient to treat. Her wolf. His jaw. Again with his jaw. "I've been staring at that jaw for 3 months, and you still won't let me—" "Stop," Willa told her wolf silently. "I haven't even finished the sentence." "You don't need to." Asha lay in her room at the top of the Sunspire, breath thin as spun glass. The air was thick with the scent of fading magic and old paper, but today there was something else, something Willa's wolf caught before she did. A low, ancient hum beneath the surface of things, like a sound too deep to hear, but heavy enough to feel in the bones. The old woman's scent had changed since the last visit, not worse, sharper, more deliberate, like someone gathering themselves. "She smells like waiting," her wolf said, and the sarcasm was gone. Not dying, deciding. Asha's eyes fixed on Willa, then they moved, slowly, deliberately, to the king standing behind her, and then back, not looking at them separately, reading the space between them, the thread that burned so bright it was almost visible to the naked eye. The old woman's face shifted. Recognition, yes, but also something harder. Frustration, resignation, and the fierce, loving impatience of someone who has watched two people she cares about waste months dancing around the obvious.
Still?
Asha whispered, her voice like rustling leaves. She looked at Bastian, then at Willa, then at the air between them, which was practically vibrating. A tired sigh, almost amused. You're both going to make me do this the hard way. Neither of them understood what she meant. They would. Willa went to work. She assessed, she measured, she crushed herbs and steeped teas, the same routine she'd performed on every visit, the competence that was the one thing she trusted about herself completely. Bastian watched from the window, a presence she'd never learned to tune out, no matter how many times she'd tried. And then moonrise came, and Asha died, and Willa failed, and she went to sleep in a guest chamber that smelled like someone else's life, and woke up to the same Tuesday. Which is where we came in. On the second Tuesday, Willa tried to explain.
We've done this already, she insisted, her voice tight with a rising panic that felt like her ribs were shrinking around her lungs.
She dies. At moonrise. I was here. You were here. Bastian regarded her with a look of carefully controlled concern, the kind that suggested he was mentally reviewing the closest location of the palace physician. Healer, you've had a long journey. Perhaps you're overtired. His wolf stirred. The healer is distressed. She smells like fear, but not the kind that comes from danger, the kind that comes from knowing something no one else knows. A beat. This is interesting. We will watch. Willa's wolf was less measured. He doesn't remember. No one remembers. We are alone in this. The enforcer's voice had lost its edge, replaced with something raw and frightened. But we are not imagining it. Our body knows. Trust us. On the third Tuesday, Willa didn't bother explaining. She changed the herbal mixture, added a poultice she hadn't used the day before, adjusted the temperature of the room. Her hands moved with desperate precision. It made no difference. At moonrise, Asha died. But something happened on the third Tuesday that Willa didn't see. After she left the room, after the stillness settled, Bastian stayed. He stood over Asha's body and felt something break. Not the grief, which was its own constant thing, but the wall behind it. The one he'd been maintaining for 3 months of Willa's visits. 3 months of careful distance and controlled breathing and pretending the healer was just a healer. The loop had stripped something away. 3 identical days of watching her work, watching her fail, watching her carry it. Something in the repetition had worn the wall too thin. His wolf, which had known since Willa's very first visit and had been waiting with increasingly strained patience, said a single word into the silence. Hours. Not new information, just the first time the human was too exhausted to shut it out. And a bond, once the wolf's acknowledgement breaks through, even once, even in a whisper, is not something a time loop can erase cleanly. The spell could reset the day. It could not unring that bell. Her wolf sat with her in the dark of her guest chamber afterward, silent for once. Then, very quietly, again. On the fourth Tuesday, Willa woke up and screamed into her pillow for a full minute. Her wolf let her. Then, done? Good. Get up. We're going to figure this out. She marched to the Sunspire and found Bastian already there, staring at the sleeping elder. He turned, and for the first time she saw a crack in his royal composure. His eyes were wild. Not panicked exactly, but the careful stillness of his body was too perfect, too controlled, like a man holding himself together by force of will. It's Tuesday, she said, her voice flat. I know, he said. 2 words. The silence after them was enormous. His wolf had felt the bond on day 3, and what the wolf knows, the loop cannot take back. He was trapped, too. His wolf was, for the first time in Bastian's memory, not calm. The sun is in the wrong place. The bird sang the same song. The guard said the same words. Something has broken, something fundamental. The wolf's voice dropped to a near whisper. Fix it. Chapter 2. The Scientists. For the next week, they became scientists in a laboratory of grief. Each morning, the same sunbeam, the same bird call, the same dying woman in the same bed. Day 5, Willa strode in with a new satchel of roots, her jaw set. Cardiotonic infusion. Different approach entirely. She worked for hours, her wolf tracking every change in Asha's breathing, her scent, the barely perceptible electrical hum of whatever magic was keeping the old woman tethered. And there it was again, the thing her wolf had caught on the last real Tuesday. That hum beneath the surface. That sense of something held rather than failing. Asha's body was dying, but something underneath it was rigid, purposeful, like a fist clenched around a thread. Asha's heart stopped at moonrise. Clean and sudden, like someone flipping a switch. Not medical, her wolf said into the silence. That was not a body giving out. That was a body being told to stop. Something is running this, something old. Day 6. Bastian sealed the room, dismissed the guards. No interruptions, no external stimuli. They sat in the dim quiet, watching Asha breathe. A sudden, inexplicable chill filled the room around moonrise. Not a draft, not a temperature change, something deeper. And Asha was gone. We controlled every variable, his wolf observed with terrifying mildness. She died anyway. This is unacceptable. I will need to have a conversation with whatever is doing this. It will not enjoy the conversation. Day 7. They tried environment. They moved Asha, bed and all, to a chamber in the heart of the palace, surrounded by solid rock and warmth. A tapestry depicting the pack's founding, an enormous, ancient thing that had survived 3 centuries of palace life, inexplicably tore from the wall. The crash was enough to still Asha's fragile heart. If the tapestry does that again, Bastian's wolf said, in the mildest voice imaginable, I will unmake it, thread by thread. This is not a threat, it is a schedule. Day 8, they sat in the room and stared at Asha, utterly defeated. Bastian was in the chair by the fire. Willa was cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by discarded herb packets. They hadn't spoken in 2 hours. The silence wasn't comfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who had run out of ideas and were both too stubborn to say it first. Her wolf nudged her. Look at him. Willa looked. Bastian was staring at his hands, and for a moment, he wasn't a king. He was just a man who kept failing to save someone and couldn't make it stop. His shoulders, usually so precisely arranged, were slumped. The wolf's stillness was gone, replaced by something human and exhausted. And then, a small thing, but Willa noticed it. He rubbed the back of his neck, and his hand moved wrong, too fast. The gesture was human, but the speed wasn't. The wolf was close to the surface, fraying the edges of his control in ways he probably didn't even know she could see. Something in Willa's chest clenched. That, her wolf said softly. That feeling, that's not fatigue from travel either. He's showing you the cracks without meaning to. That's the most honest thing he's done all week. Shut up, Willa whispered. No, the enforcer said, with the quiet certainty of someone who had stopped being patient about 3 days ago. I will not shut up. I have been quiet. I have let you pretend. But you're sitting on the floor of a dying woman's room, surrounded by failed remedies, and the thing that just made your chest hurt wasn't the dying woman. It was him. Deal with that or don't. But stop lying to us both. On day 9, the palace cat incident happened. In retrospect, Willa should have known. The cat, a massive, battle-scarred ginger tom that Bastian referred to as a security liability, and the kitchen staff called the situation, had been eyeing Asha's room with the territorial intensity of a creature who had claimed every warm spot in the palace as sovereign territory. Willa tried to reason with it. She crouched in the hallway, using the calm, patient voice she used with frightened animals, while the cat stared at her with the flat, unblinking contempt of an apex predator who had never been frightened of anything in its life. "You can't go in there," she said firmly. The cat went in there. What followed was a chain of events so precisely, catastrophically choreographed, that it felt designed. The cat knocked a vial off Asha's bedside table, which startled a servant carrying broth, who stumbled into a curtain rod, which fell against the window, which created a draft that blew out the candles, which caused the servant to gasp, which caused the cat to yowl, which caused Asha to inhale the broth she was being fed, and this, Bastian said afterward, staring at the chaos with the hollow eyes of a man who had just watched an elder choke to death because of a cat, is why I wanted it relocated. The cat, his wolf observed from somewhere beneath the rubble of Bastian's composure, has killed more efficiently than the rogues who took my father. I would be impressed if I were not so deeply, personally furious. It will be relocated to a different kingdom. Day 10. Willa tried something she'd been resisting. Not a remedy, but a ritual. A Whispering Pines tradition her grandmother had taught her, meant for easing a spirit's passage rather than preventing it. She sat beside Asha's bed in the early hours, her hands steady, her voice low, and she sang. An old song, one that had no translation, that lived in the body more than the mind. Bastian stood in the doorway, arrested. She didn't know he was there. The song filled the room like water filling a vessel, and something in him, the part that had been wound tight since his father died, the part that never unclenched, loosened, just a fraction. Her voice wasn't beautiful in a performance sense. It was beautiful the way a campfire is beautiful, warm, real, slightly rough at the edges. His wolf was completely still, not filing, not assessing, just listening. Then, very quietly, "Remember this, all of it." The sound of her voice, the way the candlelight catches her hair, the way this room feels right now. This is not strategic intelligence. This is just something we need to keep. Asha died at moonrise anyway, but she died with Willa's hand in hers and a look on her face that might have been peace. By day 12, they had exhausted every conceivable intervention. Willa had tried remedies from 3 continents. Bastian had reinforced the floorboards, checked for drafts, and permanently relocated the palace cat to the stables after the day 9 incident, which neither of them could discuss without Willa's eye twitching. They had controlled the environment, the temperature, the company. They had removed every potential hazard in the room, except each other. Gregor, Bastian's beta, poked his head in. His face, permanently fixed in a state of weary exasperation, surveyed the scene. His king slumped in a chair, a visiting healer sitting on the floor surrounded by botanical wreckage, a dying woman sleeping peacefully through all of it. "Everything all right, Your Majesty? You've been in here for hours." "It's fine, Gregor," Bastian grunted. "Right, because it's always fine when you lock yourself in a room with a dying woman and a visiting healer and refuse all food." Gregor's tone was dry as bone dust. "Just another Tuesday." Willa and Bastian exchanged a look of pure, unfiltered horror. Gregor saw it. "What? What day did you just say it was?" Willa asked. "Tuesday? Are you both feeling all right?" He left, shaking his head. They were alone again, with the horrifying knowledge that the loop was personal. No one else was stuck, just them. Their relationship had devolved from formal politeness to the bickering camaraderie of soldiers trapped in a foxhole. They had stopped using titles somewhere around day 6. By day 10, Willa had taken to sitting in Bastian's chair when he wasn't looking, just to see the flicker of irritation cross his face. He had started leaving the window open because he'd noticed she liked the cold air, though neither of them had acknowledged this. "If you tell me to remain calm one more time," Willa seethed on day 12, grinding a particularly stubborn root into powder with enough force to crack the mortar, I will use this pestle to permanently remodel your ridiculously symmetrical face. She felt the words leave her mouth and realized, with a distant sort of surprise, that she had just described the king's face as ridiculously symmetrical. Her wolf made a sound that was almost a purr. You said it, not me. But since we're finally being honest, yes, his face is a problem. His jaw specifically. It's very distracting when we're trying to be angry. I've been meaning to bring this up. Bastion's wolf, meanwhile, she is threatening violence. She is also flushed and her pulse has increased. These two facts are not unrelated. We will not examine why. A beat. His jaw. She mentioned his jaw. I am merely suggesting, Bastion said through gritted teeth, that panicking has for the past 11 days proven to be an ineffective strategy. And what's your brilliant strategy? Staring at her with grim determination? You look like you're trying to intimidate death itself into taking a holiday. He didn't have a response to that, because it was largely true. He felt his control, the one thing he valued above all else, fraying with every reset. He was the king. He was supposed to fix things. And he was failing, over and over, in the most public and yet most private way imaginable. His wolf sat with that. We have failed 12 times. The same failure. 12 different approaches, one result. This is not a problem of effort. This is a problem of understanding. We are solving the wrong equation. Chapter 3. The Discovery. On day 13, Willa gave up. She walked into the room, saw Bastion already there with his shoulders slumped, and simply sat down in the chair by the window. I'm out of ideas, she said, the admission a lead weight in her gut. I've used every herb, every technique I know. I can't save her. Bastion nodded, not looking at her. Then he gestured to the countless shelves of books and scrolls that lined the room. She was the Moonkeeper, the guardian of our oldest lore. Maybe the answer isn't in your satchel. Maybe it's in hers. Willa blinked. It was a shift in perspective so profound it felt like the world tilting on its axis. They weren't trying to stop her from dying anymore. They were trying to understand why they were being forced to watch. Smart, her wolf said, and there was a note of grudging respect in her voice that Willa hadn't heard directed at anyone in a very long time. He stopped trying to control the outcome and started trying to understand the system. That's different. Don't, Willa told her wolf. I didn't say anything. I just said he's smart. And that he smells like cold pine and authority. Those are facts. I'm a narrator, not a matchmaker. They started with Asha's journals, dozens of them, filled with elegant looping script that was maddeningly indecipherable. A code mixing ancient wolf script and personal shorthand. For the next 5 days, they worked. The world shrank to the confines of that room. The scent of old paper and drying ink, the soft sound of Asha's breathing, the scratch of their pens as they tried to unravel a lifetime of secrets. They worked in shifts, napping in armchairs pushed close enough to the fire that their edges were slowly scorching. Willa learned that Bastion snored, a soft, rumbling sound that was, she was forced to admit, not unpleasant. Her wolf called it acceptable background noise, and then made her listen to it for 45 minutes straight by refusing to let her sleep. She also learned that he talked in his sleep, barely, fragments of sentences, mostly nonsense, but once, very clearly, the word stay. Her wolf filed it without comment, and then replayed it every time Willa tried to convince herself this was purely professional. He learned that she hummed when she was concentrating, a tuneless little melody that got stuck in his head for the rest of every day. He learned she had a tiny scar above her left eyebrow from a fall she'd taken as a child, and that she touched it when she was thinking hard, an unconscious gesture she didn't seem to know she made. He learned she hated the palace's coffee, with a passion that bordered on moral outrage, which she described as tasting like disappointment and boiled dirt. She is very specific about coffee, his wolf observed. This is important. Why it is important is unclear, but we have noted the specific way she wrinkles her nose when she drinks it, and that image is now filed in a location we cannot remove it from. This is fine. Everything is fine. On day 15, he brought her a cup of coffee from his private stash. Good coffee, dark and rich, that he kept in his study for nights when the kingdom's problems outlasted the kitchen staff's patience. He didn't make a thing of it. He just set it down next to her hand while she was deep in a journal and went back to his own work. Willa picked it up, took a sip, and went very still. It was good. It was excellent. It was coffee that had been specifically, deliberately procured for someone who hated bad coffee. The kind of attention that meant someone had been listening to a complaint she'd made in passing days ago during a crisis and had filed it away as something worth fixing. She looked at him. He was reading, or pretending to. The tips of his ears were slightly red. Her wolf made a sound that was half laugh, half ache. He's blushing. The king is blushing because he brought us coffee. We're supposed to be immune to this. We are not immune to this. I need you to know that whatever wall you think you have left, it has a door, and he just walked through it, carrying a cup of really good coffee. Willa drank the coffee. She didn't say thank you, because if she opened her mouth, she wasn't sure what would come out. But she hummed, a small involuntary sound of pleasure, and across the table, Bastian's pen stopped moving for a full 3 seconds. That sound, his wolf noted, with the careful devastation of someone documenting their own undoing. Filed. Permanently. Under reasons we are no longer functioning as a rational being. The proximity was doing things to both of them that neither would acknowledge. When they worked at the same table, their elbows nearly touching over spread journals, the air between them took on a quality that was almost tactile, a warmth, a charge, like the moment before a storm breaks. Willa would catch a draft of his scent when he shifted in his chair, pine and cold stone and something underneath that made her wolf go very still and very focused, and she would lose her place in whatever journal she was deciphering. She noticed other things, too. The way his hands moved when he was translating. Large hands, careful with the old paper, capable of a gentleness that contradicted everything about his size. The way he rolled his shoulders when he'd been sitting too long, a gesture that was purely wolf, the body wanting to move, to stretch into a form that had more room. Once, when he was reading something that frustrated him, he growled. Not a human sound of irritation, an actual, low, rumbling growl that vibrated in the air between them. He didn't seem to notice he'd done it. Willa noticed. Her wolf noticed so hard it was practically a medical event. He just growled, the enforcer said, her voice strangled, in his chest, while reading. Do you understand what that does to us? Do you have any concept? My entire body just... We need to leave this room. No, we need to stay in this room. I don't know what we need. This is your fault. All of this is your fault. Your hands stopped moving, the enforcer added a moment later, having collected herself. They stopped when he leaned closer. You're not breathing normally. These are related observations. I'm just keeping records. I'm fine, Willa said out loud, and then had to pretend she'd been talking to herself about a passage in the journal. On day 18, she found it. A passage tucked away in a journal from 50 years ago, written in a younger, more forceful hand. The soul tether, Willa read aloud, her voice hushed. A dying spell of last resort, cast by a moonkeeper with a sight for the threads of fate. It anchors the caster's soul to a single turn of the moon, a day frozen in time, until a bond of supreme importance is not just recognized, but freely chosen. A knot in time that can only be untied by the hands it was meant for. She looked up at Bastian. His face was pale in the late afternoon light. A fated bond. The jolt she'd felt on that first day, the one she'd dismissed, then ignored, then actively suppressed, came rushing back with the force of a wave breaking. The way his wolf seemed to call to something in her that had been running for 6 years. The way his presence, for all its infuriating control, felt like the first solid ground she'd stood on since the Whispering Pines. "Us?" he breathed, and it wasn't a question. His wolf said nothing for a long moment. Then, very quietly, with the absolute calm of someone who had known the answer since the first second and had been waiting patiently for the humans to catch up. "Yes, obviously. I noted this on day 1. But I understand your species processes information at a different speed. No judgment. Some." Willa's wolf was less diplomatic. "Finally! I have been screaming! 6 years! 6 years I've been watching you run from every good thing. And now you're sitting in a room with the reason you were built to stop running. And it still took you 18 days to—" The enforcer caught herself, took a breath. Okay, we're here now. Don't mess this up." Asha hadn't been dying of old age. She'd been watching. For 3 months, from her bed, she had watched them circle each other, visit after visit, suppressed wolf after suppressed wolf, careful distance maintained like a treaty neither had signed but both obeyed. She had seen the bond. She had seen them refuse it. And when she felt her own time running out, she had decided, if they wouldn't choose each other in a world that was moving forward, she would stop the world until they did. The journals laid out 3 conditions for breaking the tether: recognition, free choice, and sacrifice. The armor of the soul must be laid down. For the next week they tried. They entered a new, far more awkward phase of their temporal imprisonment. They had to get to know each other, not as king and healer, but as the 2 halves of a bond that a dying woman had chained them together to acknowledge. "Tell me something you're afraid of," Willa said on day 20, staring at a crack in the ceiling. They were on opposite sides of the room, which felt like a necessary precaution, given that the air between them had become a thing with its own temperature. "Failing my pack," he answered immediately. "No, a real thing. Something that keeps you up at night." He was silent for a long time, long enough that Willa thought he might not answer. Then, "Spiders." A pause. And, "Disappointing the memory of my father." His wolf stirred uncomfortably. That was more than we intended to share. The conversation has become unsafe. Recommend changing topic to territorial boundaries or the quality of the local deer population. His jaw is doing a thing. Are we clenching? We're clenching. Stop that. "I'm afraid," Willa confessed into the quiet that followed, "of staying in one place long enough for it to feel like home. Because home is just a place you haven't been forced to leave yet." Her wolf was silent after that. Not the sarcastic silence, not the pointed silence, just quiet. As if even the enforcer recognized that some truths, once spoken aloud, needed room to breathe. They were 2 sides of the same wounded coin. He built walls to keep everyone safe inside. She built them to keep herself from ever needing to stay. A mirror, reflecting the same fear in a different form. The intimacy, forced as it was terrifying. They learned each other's histories in fragmented pieces, shared over lukewarm tea while Asha slept peacefully nearby. He told her about growing up in the shadow of a great king, the weight of expectation a physical burden on a boy's shoulders. She told him about the Whispering Pines, how it had dissolved under the pressure of a harsh winter and a weak alpha, scattering its members to the winds. Her family was gone. Her home was a memory. Her independence wasn't a choice, it was a scar. And with every piece of history exchanged, the physical awareness between them intensified. It was becoming impossible to ignore. When his hand brushed hers as they reached for the same journal on day 22, the contact sent a current up her arm so sharp she nearly gasped. His fingers lingered, just a fraction of a second too long to be accidental. And then he pulled away, his face carefully neutral. His wolf. That was 3 seconds of contact. Our entire nervous system reorganized. This is medically significant. We should probably touch her again, for research purposes, to confirm the data. This is science. Her wolf. Your hand is tingling. It's been 4 minutes. Still tingling. I just want you to know that. For your records. They didn't talk about it. They didn't talk about the way the room seemed to shrink when they were both in it, or the way she had started unconsciously tracking his breathing, or the way he had repositioned his chair so that when the firelight hit her face at a certain angle, he could see the gold flecks in her eyes. He was not aware he had done this. His wolf was.
On day 25, they decided they had enough information. They stood before Asha's bed, the air thick with forced solemnity, and attempted the ritual. Recognition. I, Willa of the Scattered Whispering Pines, recognize you, Bastion of the Silverwood Pack, as my fated mate. It sounded like she was reading a lease agreement. And I recognize you as mine. Free choice. I freely choose to accept this bond. As do I. Sacrifice, Willa faltered. I sacrifice my solitude. I sacrifice my need for absolute command. They stood there, waiting. Nothing happened. The magic, it turned out, could smell a fake. She was still planning her escape route. He was still trying to manage the outcome. The words were correct. The meaning wasn't. Her wolf sighed. You said the right things and felt none of them. I am not surprised. I am, however, running out of patience. We have been in this room for 25 days. Your fear is boring me. Chapter 4. The Breaking. The failed ritual left a bitter taste. For 2 days they barely spoke, circling each other like wary animals. Then, on day 28, the tension snapped. This is pointless, Willa said, slamming a journal shut. I am aware of the stasis, thank you, Bastion replied, in the voice he used right before he sentenced someone to guard duty in the northern wastes. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're perfectly happy in here. It's the one place in your entire kingdom you can actually control. No variables, no surprises. His jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped. And you? This must be a holiday for you. No risk of accidentally forming an attachment when you know the world will reset in a few hours. That's not fair. Isn't it? You talk about your independence like it's a virtue, but it's not. It's a fortress, and you've been hiding in it for so long you've forgotten how to open the gate. Oh, and you're the expert on opening up? You're the most emotionally locked down man I've ever met. My emotions are not a matter for public debate. He was on his feet now, his alpha aura flaring, filling the room with a pressure that would have made most wolves cower. Willa didn't flinch. Her wolf didn't let her. Stand, the enforcer said, and it wasn't a suggestion. He needs to see that you're not afraid of him. Not because he's testing you, because he's never had anyone stay when he does this. They are when they're keeping us trapped in purgatory, Willa said, her voice low and steady. What are you so afraid of losing? Everything! The word was torn from him, raw and ragged. The royal mask shattered. I'm afraid of losing everything. Again. The room went very still. He walked to the window. His shoulders, usually so precise, were slumped. When my father died, he said, his voice hollowed out, I was there. Ambushed on a hunt. Rogues. I was 16, all arrogance and raw strength. He took a shaky breath. I tried to take command of the guards, tried to control the situation. I created an opening. The rogue that killed him, he had to get past me to do it. The royal guards were following my idiotic orders instead of their own instincts. I created the chaos that killed him. He turned to face her. His eyes were filled with a grief so old it seemed to have carved canyons into his soul. My control isn't about power, Willa. It's penance. It's a promise I made to his memory, that I would never let a variable I could have managed be the reason someone I love gets hurt again. The confession hung in the air. Willa's training, her instincts, everything in her screamed to fix it, to offer platitudes. It wasn't your fault. You were just a boy. But she knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that those words would be a poison. They would be an attempt to manage his grief, to control his pain. It would be the same mistake he was making. Her wolf spoke, and for once there was no sarcasm, no edge, just the raw, primal wisdom of an animal that understood territory and loss and the sacred weight of being present. Don't fix it. Don't speak. Just stay. He doesn't need a healer right now. He needs a witness. So Willa did the hardest thing she had ever done. She did nothing. She walked over, pulled a small footstool closer to the window, and sat down. She didn't touch him. She didn't speak. She just sat with him, a quiet presence in his orbit of pain, and let his grief exist in the room without judgment. She let it be heavy. She let it be real. And for the first time in 12 years, Bastian wasn't alone with it. His wolf, for the first time in Willa's knowing of him, went completely, utterly silent. Not the calculated silence of the calm disaster measuring a threat. Just silence. The kind that comes when something has been held so long and so tightly that the act of someone simply sitting beside you, not trying to fix it, not trying to manage it, just being there, loosens the grip enough for the thing to exist outside your own body. The quiet lasted a long time. Outside, the unchanging courtyard held its unchanging shadows. Inside, something shifted that had nothing to do with time or magic. The fight changed the texture of their days. The tension was gone, replaced by a quiet, fragile intimacy. The loop no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a sanctuary, a timeless pocket where the pressures of the outside world couldn't touch them. They stopped trying to break the spell. They just lived. On day 29, Willa found a small, forgotten herb garden on one of the palace balconies. She spent the morning kneading dough in the royal kitchens, her sleeves pushed up to her elbows, flour in her hair. She brought a warm loaf up to Asha's room, along with cheese and jam she'd found in a pantry that smelled of summer. Bastian was there, reading aloud from one of the journals in a low murmur. They ate in comfortable silence. He watched her tear bread with her fingers. The domesticity of the moment, the smell of warm bread, the sound of Asha's soft breathing, Willa sitting cross-legged on the floor with flour still on her cheek, hit him like a physical blow. His wolf said it so quietly he almost didn't hear. This is what we have been afraid to want. On day 30, he brought a chess set to the room. She was terrible at it, too impulsive, moving pieces on instinct while he thought 10 moves ahead. She lost 3 games in a row. On the 4th, she did something so unexpectedly chaotic, sacrificing her queen in a move that looked suicidal and turned out to be devastating, that it threw his entire strategy into disarray. She won. The look of stunned disbelief on his face made her laugh, a real, genuine laugh that echoed in the quiet room. It changed the shape of her face entirely. He stared at her, a slow smile spreading across his own, and for a moment he wasn't a king. He was just a man who had been pleasantly, thoroughly outmaneuvered. We would lose every game for the rest of our life to hear that sound again, his wolf said, with the quiet devastation of someone who has fully surrendered and doesn't even mind. This is no longer a problem. This is simply what we are now. On the evening of day 31, they were sitting by the fire. The chessboard between them was forgotten. The room was warm and dim and smelled of wood smoke and old books, and each other. Somewhere in the past week, their scents had started to mingle in the space, his pine and cold stone braiding with her sage and warm rain, and neither of them had mentioned it, though both their wolves had noticed, and had opinions. "I have a confession," he said, staring into the flames. Willa's breath caught. "When?" He knew what she was asking. "Around day 10, the day you tried to reason with the palace cat. You were so determined, and it was so utterly unimpressed. I realized I was enjoying this, watching you, being with you." He looked at her. "When did you?" Day 15, she whispered. The day you brought me that coffee from your private stash. Because you remembered I hated the kitchens. It was such a small thing. But no one had ever paid that kind of attention before. He was close. When had he gotten this close? She could feel the warmth of him, the steady pull of his presence, like gravity made personal. His hand was on the arm of her chair, inches from hers. Her wolf was very still, very focused. He is right there. Your skin knows. Every hair on your arm knows. You could close the distance, you're not going to, but your body has already decided, and it is just waiting for your mind to catch up. She didn't close the distance, neither did he, but the not closing it was its own kind of intimacy. The charged, trembling space between two people who know exactly what they want and are choosing to let it build. They were in love. Not the thunderclap of a fated bond or the demand of a magic spell, a quiet thing that had grown in the repeating days, nurtured by shared frustration, inside jokes about a homicidal tapestry, and the bone-deep understanding of each other's scars. The loop had forced them together. They had chosen to meet in the middle. Chapter 5, Wednesday. On day 34, Willa woke with a startling clarity. She knew what she had to do, what her sacrifice had to be. Not solitude, the fear that made solitude her only option. She found Bastian by the window in Asha's room, watching the sunrise that would inevitably be erased. He turned as she entered, and the look on his face, soft, unguarded, a look he would never have shown her on day 1, made her heart clench. Bastian, she said, I need to tell you something. He waited. My whole life I've been running. I told myself it was freedom, that not belonging to any place or any pack meant I was strong. But it wasn't strength. It was fear. The day my pack fell apart, I learned that everything you love can be taken away. So I decided not to love anything. She took a step closer. Her wolf was with her, not pushing, not enforcing, just present. A steady warmth behind her ribs that said, I'm here. Keep going. You're not doing this alone. These days with you have been the happiest of my life. And the most terrifying, because I don't want to run anymore. She looked him straight in the eye. I'm not staying because the loop is making me. I'm staying because you are the first place I have ever wanted to stay. I am choosing this. I am choosing you. Even if it means it will hurt someday. His expression was something she would remember for the rest of her life. Awe and relief. And the specific grief of someone who has been holding a door shut for years and is finally letting go of the handle. My control, he said, his voice thick, was a promise I made to a ghost. A way to never feel that helpless again. But it was a cage. He took her hand. His thumb moved over her knuckles, and the contact was so gentle it was almost unbearable. With you, I don't need to be in control. Because for the first time, I feel safe enough to just be. The king can fall, the strategist can fail, and you'll still be here. He let go. She let go. Not of each other, of the fears they had mistaken for their identities. A soft golden light began to emanate from Asha's bed. Not a sudden flash, but a slow, gentle dawn, filling every corner of the room. It wrapped around them, warm, ancient, full of something that felt like love and time, and the particular kindness of an old woman who had seen the threads of fate and decided to give them a tug. The air grew thick, time stretched like honey, and then, with a sound like a single perfect bell chime, it snapped back into place. The light faded. The room was the same, yet utterly different. The sunbeam slanting through the window was longer, hitting a new spot on the floor. Outside, the morning bird sang a different song. The shadows, Bastian whispered. They've moved. It was over. They turned to Asha. She lay peacefully, a faint, serene smile on her lips. Gone. But this time it felt different. Not a failure. An ending. A gentle, earned release. On the table beside her bed lay her journal, open to the last page. The ink was still fresh. Willa reached out a trembling hand and read aloud. The bond was always there. You just needed time. I gave you enough. Tears welled in Willa's eyes. Grief for the woman who had given them this impossible gift, and overwhelming relief. Bastian wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. She leaned into him, burying her face in his shoulder, breathing him in. Pine and cold stone, and something underneath that her wolf had been trying to name for 34 days. Home, her wolf said simply. That's the word. You've been looking for it your whole life. Stop looking. And then, a shift. Bastian's arm tightened around her. She felt his breath change, felt the rumble of something low in his chest that wasn't quite a sound. His lips brushed her temple, and the contact sent a cascade of warmth down her spine. She tilted her face up. The kiss, when it came, was soft, unhurried. The first one, after 34 days of not kissing, of charged silences and near touches and the aching, deliberate restraint of two people who wanted to earn this. It tasted like salt and relief, and the specific sweetness of something that had been chosen, not forced. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers. His breathing was unsteady. Hers was worse. We should mark her, his wolf said. And for the first time, the calm disaster's voice was not calm at all. It was raw and wanting and barely controlled. Now. She is ours. Make it permanent. The impulse hit Bastian with staggering force. Primal, undeniable. The deepest part of his wolf nature demanding completion. His eyes dropped to the curve of her neck, and she saw it. The flicker of gold in his irises, the wolf rising to the surface, the way his hand trembled against her jaw. Willa felt it too. The answering pull in her own body, the tilt of her neck that was pure instinct. Her wolf practically vibrating. Yes, yes, do it, let him, we've waited long enough. But Willa's hand came up and pressed gently against his chest, not pushing away, holding the moment exactly where it was. Not yet, she whispered. Not because I don't want it, but because I want it to be the first thing we choose in a world that's actually moving forward. He exhaled, shaky, rough, and pressed his lips to her forehead instead. Wednesday, he said, his voice like gravel. We'll do it on a Wednesday. Deal, she breathed. His wolf. This is torture. But she is correct. And the fact that she is correct makes it worse. And better. Simultaneously. I am experiencing a new emotion. I dislike it. I also do not want it to stop. Later that morning, they were in the palace library, trying to explain 34 days of repeated history to a very confused Gregor. And so the temporal loop, which was anchored to Elder Asha's soul, dissolved when we willingly fulfilled the 3 conditions of the soul tether spell, Bastian finished, sounding like he was delivering a military report. Gregor stared at them, a half-eaten pastry halfway to his mouth. He blinked slowly. So let me get this straight. You two have been reliving the same Tuesday for over a month, fell in love due to a magical timeout imposed by a dying woman, and have just now rejoined the normal flow of time? Essentially, yes, Willa said, sipping a cup of coffee that was, she noted with a small, private smile, absolutely delicious. From his private stash, he'd had it waiting. Her wolf purred. He remembered. He always remembers. You can stop running now. The gate is open. Gregor took a slow, deliberate bite of his pastry. He chewed thoughtfully, his eyes flicking between the two of them. He swallowed. Right, he said, his voice utterly deadpan. He pointed the remnant of his pastry at Bastian. This explains so much. I was wondering why the first thing you did this morning, on a day when we're meant to be arranging a state funeral, was send a rider to the eastern villages for coffee beans. Bastian had the good grace to look embarrassed. His wolf did not. She wrinkled her nose at the palace coffee on day 1. I made a note. The note became a plan. The plan became an acquisition. The acquisition was the most important strategic decision of our reign. I regret nothing. Willa laughed, a bright, clear sound that filled the dusty library.
Bastian looked at her, and his face did the thing it had started doing around day 15. It softened, the king falling away, leaving just the man. His wolf settled, warm and quiet. We have waited a very long time to feel like this. It was worth every Tuesday. It was the sound of a gate, long rusted shut, finally swinging open. It was the sound of Wednesday.